Hey everyone, Tony D and Little Joan here with a webcomic profile. Little Joan, you going to sleep? Oh, poor sleepyhead. Poor sleepyhead. Anyhow, we are going to talk about today's comic on the Webcomic Factory, Miserable Comedians, and it's drawn by Mike Williams. And the premise of the comic is it's about stand-up comics in New York and just in general how miserable stand-up comedians are in their kind of real lives. And you know, the tagline was uh, just because we try to make you laugh doesn't mean just because you're funny doesn't mean you're happy. That was the tagline. And so it was a drama about. It was a drama, yet it was also a comedy about stand-up comedians. And I, over the years, hung out with stand-up comics. I did stand-up. I wrote for stand-up comedians, and I kind of got to know them. And I thought it would be a fun, a different kind of web comic. Um, because one of the things I wanted to talk, I wanted to talk about the different things I learned being amongst their kind. So, as you can see, I have several different chapters here with various strips. The first chapter was You Eat Garbage, which was, it started as a black and white comic, and this is Donner. He's sort of the main character. And the reason I went with Donner is because he is basically the sort of stand up comic who becomes very successful. He's handsome, number one, and that really gives him a leg up over most comedians. And he's also funny. He's got like the right mix of he's edgy, but he's also pragmatic. And I think that's a two important things. He also has some issues. They all have issues, but Donner ends up becoming the most successful out of the group, and with him he carries along some of the other comedians, and you can see him here getting mad, getting mad at a heckler. We've done that strip a few times. These are all the main characters. Grub is another guy. He was named after a person I knew as a coworker. His nickname was Grub, and so we came up with this a character, Mike Grub, and Mike is kind of he's a fat guy comic, if you know what I mean. And fat guy comics, they're fat and they're funny. They tend to do pretty good as well. But Mike is very unsure of himself, so he's constantly second guessing himself. I think later I was going to have him become a drug addict and kind of do like a whole Artie Lang thing, but he's very sort of influenced by other comics, and that kind of holds him back in a lot of ways. His confidence gets sort of, it messes with his mind. And then you got Vic, who's another sort of main character. Now Vic and Donner kind of pick on Grub, but Vic he's the comedian's comedian, and he is the real edgy guy. He is the guy that the other comedians envy because he's so sort of out there and uncompromising. But ultimately, that leads to his downfall because he doesn't get the opportunities that a more pragmatic comedian like Donner gets, and so he ends up kind of screwing himself. But then later, he realizes that he would be better more as a behind-the-scenes guy, and becomes kind of like Donner's helper and writer as he brings him up. Now we never got to really finish the story with Donner's rise to fame, but we got a good ways into it. You could kind of see what was happening. Vic had some contacts and he was using them to magnify Donner's rise. And then you got Villa, and Villa was sort of he's an older guy and he's kind of a weirdo. He's funny. They're all kind of funny, but Villa's kind of like past his prime sort of comedian, and he's also got some issues, but he kind of just can't stop. And so he's on the comedy scene, and in the first story, him and Donner have a problem with each other, and there are other characters too. But anyhow, it started out as black and white, and I thought it looked great as a black and white comic. I like black and white, but then eventually Mike started coloring it and putting in that extra work, and that looked great. That looked great too. So this was I think the second story with Villa, and you see him show up with his wife, and his wife is kind of enormous, and this is part of a storyline. I won't ruin it for you, where Donner actually accidentally reveals something about him and what him and Villa did something, and it kind of gets him in trouble. Now this is another character. She's a successful comedian who moved out to L.A. and Vic used to date her, and she comes to New York looking to get Vic involved in some of the projects out in L.A. and stuff goes down. And then and Donner's involved too in some respects. But again, I don't want to give it away. Later, we did a Super Frat crossover, and this was huge fun for me for a lot of reasons. The guys go on a college comedy tour, which these days nobody does anymore. It used to be one of the most lucrative things. Carrot Top made a fortune doing comedy tours at colleges. Now, stand-up comics tend to avoid colleges because the students are too sensitive. And so they go to Risemore University. Did I have the first one? Yeah. So this is Risemore here. And this actually is another college I modeled after my old alumnus, Ithaca College, because when Mike asked me, what's the sign look like in front of Risemore, I sent him a picture of Ithaca College's sort of giant hit. It was like a giant stone thing with Ithaca College on it. So he modeled it after that. And I think he modeled some of the buildings too, which was kind of cool. And so they go on tour at the college and meet all the frat bros. This is Ira, and I think that's Amber. And then they get drunk at a party, and this is Buzz, aka Buzzkill, and the crowd is just out of control, and it shakes everybody's confidence. Although it kind of doesn't shake Vic's confidence too much, because he's just a maniac when it comes to comedy. So we did what was the other? Yeah, and then we did Success is a Bitch. And this begins the rise of Donner's stardom, because what happens is he ends up with these hipster comedians. Now, at the time I wrote this, meta comedy was really in vogue. If you look at the Sarah Silverman show, the Tim and Eric show, and the idea behind meta comedy is like kind of hard to describe, but it's basically it's poorly done comedy, but knowingly done poorly well, but so poorly done like it's embarrassing, kind of thing. So it's like it's comedy making fun of comedy making fun of comedy kind of thing. And so this was something that I can't say I was against it, but I didn't think it was very sustainable as a trend in comedy. I thought it was kind of like dumb. And so this was the kind of stuff. So this was kind of like the Eric Andre show. And this was way before Eric Andre, by the way. So it was the Goldman Show. And Goldman he drank stuff and then barfed on a ventriloquist doll and then made out with it. And Donner was supposed to be his sidekick, and he thought it was a standard kind of talk show, and he didn't tell Donner ahead of time he was going to do all this weird stuff to make him uncomfortable. But Donner was just kind of sitting there expecting to do his usual comedic thing, and Goldman was just a weirdo. But it's Donner's reactions to Goldman that make the show a hit, and he just hates the show, and he doesn't want to keep going on it. But and it's low budget, so they got like a regular mic taped to his chest. It's a public access thing, and he storms out, but they keep trying to get him back in, and it makes him a big hit amongst the crowd. And then when he goes to do his stand-up show, there's like 1 million people there, and that's what starts that storyline. And then we got into the next chapter, I think, but after that, Mike had to move on to some other stuff, and he's doing a lot of comics. Oops, I'm looking for. I don't know what I did with it. I had the archive. So many archives. There it is. Miserable Comedians. So you can check it out on the Webcomic Factory. Yeah. So we got up to Agent Vic. So they're talking to a guy who's going to be Donner's agent because he needs an agent now. And then after that, we were trying to pull together the Kickstarter. It didn't quite work out, but Mike drew some standalone strips with the characters doing stand-up, and so I'm able to every once in a while go back to it. This is Kristin Donner's ex-girlfriend with a huge rack, who's also a comedian, who basically becomes his girlfriend again to help him kind of relax, basically, and because she wants to be involved in his fame too, and it's helping her career. So, they end up getting back together. And this is Pamela, who's sort of this psycho stand-up comedian who, Donner shacks up with earlier in the comic, and then something else happens, but I won't give it away. So she's kind of a main character as well. This is, I always forget his name. God, I want to say Andre, but that's not it. No, Alonzo. I knew it was an A. So Alonzo is, he's one of these comedians. He's very sort of businesslike, and he comes up, him and his friend Rene, who is, and there's Grubb doing his stand-up. There's Villa. I know Renee's in this mix. Where the heck is she? Yeah, there's Rene. And Rene, who is, she's sort of like the Janine Garofalo comic, and like her and Alonzo come up with the college tour. So so we bring back the characters. There's Donner doing a stand-up and making goofy faces, and there's Vic. But it's really tough to deliver jokes in a strip like this. To deliver stand-up jokes, it's a real challenge because it is just so hard to get it across without the delivery. There's so much involved in the delivery of a joke when you're doing stand-up. And, so people complain about the damn comic all the time. But for me, I can sort of hear the voices and picture that. So maybe some people can't. Maybe some people don't wrap their brain around it. But it was really fun. I loved Mike's faces. He's such a great artist, and he did so many things with faces and people, and the detail is good. And if you look at some of Mike's other print comics, you'll see he does like gangsters and stuff really grounded in reality. So he was a really good fit for this comic. Will we do more with it? Will we do a Kickstarter again? I don't know. Maybe. I think the material is really good. You never know. Back in sometime in the future, hopefully we'll do a Kickstarter. It's a little weird to do crowdfunding right now. I don't know, but maybe we'll get back into it. But if you get a chance, please check out Miserable Comedians at the Webcomic Factory. I'll leave a link in the description, and check out all our other strips. I think you'll like them all. Say bye, Joan. Joan's asleep.